switch, is it? Okay, I'm here with Pete Newman and Steve Reynolds, and the three of us are musicians, and we all live in the sort of Hills Road, Trumpington area. And we all play regularly at the Flying Pig on Hills Road, on Station Road corner. Woo! And exactly, it's 175 years old, that building, and because we knew it would be full here tonight, we didn't bring the other 13,000 people who have signed the petition complaining against its impending demolition. Pace Investments want to remove that building, which they say takes up 1% of the plot they want to develop. They want every last percentage of it. We reckon they can have 99% and leave us our 1%. They want to develop it into offices. There are quite a few around there already, I don't know if you've noticed around that area, but there are plenty. And we just want to know, we're musicians, the petition was signed also by residents, by patrons, by people who historically remember the pub all over the country, because the pub is nationally known now. And we want to know what councillors' opinions are, and frankly where you stand on its proposed demolition.
Thank you for that question. I'm going to allow any councillor to speak, although I'm aware that some are on the planning committee. They can either reserve their comments entirely or they can make them carefully, because we wouldn't want anybody to appear to be predetermined. Personally, I think that building should be retained in its current form. The building and not the business. The business may or may not survive if it was shoehorned into a modern building as part of an office block, but I don't think that would be in anything like the same community value, community asset that we have now. It's greatly valued by the music and real ale scene, I think we'll all agree, and that both of those value tradition and permanence. And if we lose the building, then I don't know that the business remains the same thing. And if I could bring their attention to policy, I've written it down, 76 of the Cambridge Local Plan, the protection of public houses. So I very much hope that the planning committee will consider a decision that's in tune with the spirit of that policy. Councillors.
I apologise. How do I stop it?
Councillor Sandwell.
So this is a cause that I've been championing. I spoke with, in fact, the developers contacted me early on. I promised that I would keep an open mind and I would try and listen to what the community had to say and represent their views, because that's my job. And in my mind, the community has spoken very, very clearly that they don't just want to retain the business, but they want to retain the pub as it is. So the plan is this. Firstly, we want to make absolutely sure that the pub does not get demolished without permission, and that permission be granted retrospectively. I've asked my colleague, Katie Thornborough, who's on the planning committee, so has to be very careful in what she says, to give us what the current status is in that, and I think she does have an answer for that, which I'll ask her for in a minute. That is step one. Step two is to see what we can do about any accidental damage to the pub, because there have been cases in the past where pubs that are under threat have been damaged during construction or gone up in flames accidentally. And there may be, that's a tough one to deal with, but we have some thoughts on how we can go forward with that. That's phase one. Phase two is to make sure it goes to the planning committee, and then we need to win in the planning committee, and we need to put a strong case. And that's where I've been working with community activists. I've been working with people around the pub. The current landlords of the pub have had to stay detached because of their contractual situation, but there is a strong team of people that I've helped some of them put in touch with each other to bring the evidence to the planning committee that this is a community asset, and that under the current planning policy, in my view at least, it should stay not only as a business but as a building itself. So that's the plan, and I'll need your help to fulfil that. Katie will now give us what the current status is, if possible.
Can we get to Councillor Bryden first?
Thank you. I know the petition going around last time. I was on the planning committee, so it's difficult. I'm not now, so I can actually say I fully support the Flying Pig staying as a pub with the music as it is. The only concerns I've got going to the planning committee, that I was on the planning committee when the Osborne Arms was a pub next door to it, and that's in the conservation area, hadn't got permission, and the developers went in one Saturday morning, early hours of the morning.
It was a bank holiday Monday morning.
Bank holiday Monday morning, that's it, correct. And demolished it. And nothing was ever done by the council at the time. They could have been taken to court for that. The council didn't, which I couldn't understand, because I know it happened somewhere else in London where they'd done something similar, and they were taken to court and had to rebuild the pub. So
Well done.
So, and I think the council, this council, we should be protecting this pub and telling these people we'll take the court this time.
And it
We'll
is,
let them
it
off
is the same developer.
I'm not sure about that.
No, it is.
Well, it's the same people, but it was taken up by different people, I think. But it's the CB1 site, which I think we've got to be very, very cautious and watch what they do.
So I've got some. I asked for the planning department to provide information on this, and this is a legal statement that they've prepared. But there was planning permission granted for the development next door and in the original planning application, the Flying Pig pub application, but now because we have strengthened the protection of pubs, if a proposal comes through for demolition, it needs full planning consent. Now it's because of the protection that's been put in place, it's quite a long process to get that consent. So I'll just read this. In determining an application for demolition, members, if it goes to the committee, will need to weigh on the one side the permission already granted for development, which involves substantial demolition of the Flying Pig, against the statutory duty under section 72 of the Planning, Listed Building and Conservation Area Act to preserve and enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. This has to be interpreted by case law as it includes development which leaves the character or appearance of the area unharmed and requiring consideration of what effect the replacement building or buildings would have on the conservation area. In addition, because there is a policy requirement, which is policy 76 referred to by Colin McGurty of the new plan, states that the loss of a safeguarded public house, which is it's safeguarded, includes its site, will only be permitted if it can be demonstrated that it meets the criteria set out in the policy, which include no longer needed within the community, all reasonable efforts made to preserve the facility, whether alternative provision is available within the area. The policy states that the loss of any part of a public house or its curtilage will be permitted if it can be demonstrated that the viability of the public house would not be adversely affected and the loss will not attract from the prevailing character and appearance of the area, including where the building is of merit or has any distinctive architectural features. So if it is, that is the understanding that the planning department have at the moment. So if a proposal is for demolition, whoever proposes that has a lot of work to do to show that the three things, that it's no longer needed, they need to show that all reasonable efforts have been made to preserve the facility and that there are alternatives within the area.
Thank you, Councillor Thornborough. Dan really wants to come back, but I've got Councillor Pagecroft. Sorry, Councillor.
So just briefly, the occasion on which the Osborne Arms was demolished, the reason that planning permission was granted retrospectively was the developer claimed they had not been informed of its conservation status. Could we have an action on this committee to inform the developer of that in writing, by basically passing them that legal statement in a way that they will get? I will gladly take that action if I can have a copy of that statement.